The roar of the river was a living thing, a hungry beast devouring everything in its path. Prajak, his lungs burning, fought against the churning deluge, each step a brutal contest against the current. The rain, a ceaseless cold curtain, plastered his faded green uniform to his skin, stinging his eyes. A head half submerged in the swirling muddy torrent was Malawan, a tiny elephant calf, no more than a few months old, pinned against a submerged log. Her cries were thin, desperate squeals, swallowed by the storm. But Prajak heard them with every beat of his heart. She was drowning, shivering uncontrollably, her small trunk flailing weakly. Reaching her was a nightmare. Debris, splintered branches, uprooted plants, slammed into him, threatening to drag him under. He saw the terror in Malawan's wide, dark eyes as he finally reached her, grappling with her slick, trembling body. She was too heavy, too panicked. He couldn't pull her free. Then a shadow fell over them, not from the low, bruised sky, but from the river itself. Sujinda, the matriarch, a behemoth of gray muscle and ancient wisdom, emerged from the deluge. Prajak's breath hitched. Elephants in distress could be unpredictable, dangerous. His training screamed at him. Maintain distance. Observe. Do not interfere with the herd dynamics. But Sujinda didn't charge. Instead, with a low rumble that vibrated through the water, she moved with an impossible, calculated grace. She positioned her massive body upstream from Maliwan and Prajak, her flank angled against the full force of the current. It was a deliberate, astonishing act, a living dam. The pressure eased, the water around them calming in her immense wake. Prajak stared, disbelief warring with a profound, almost spiritual awe. There was intelligence in her eyes, a fierce, unwavering determination mirroring his own. Her cooperation wasn't instinct. It was a conscious decision, a plea for help. With the immediate threat mitigated, Prajak found the purchase he needed. He wrapped his arms around Malawan, straining, pushing until with a grunt of effort, the calf slid free of the submerged log. He half carried, half pulled her towards the higher, less treacherous bank, Sujinda shadowing them, her watchful gaze never leaving her calf. On the muddy bank, Malawan collapsed, shivering violently. Prajak quickly began his assessment, his hands moving over her small frame. Her breathing was ragged, her skin dangerously cold. But as he ran his palm along her flank, his fingers brushed against something peculiar. A thin, almost iridescent sheen, metallic like powdered rust, clung to her rough hide. It wasn't mud, not river detritus. It felt unnatural, subtly abrasive. He scraped a tiny sample into a sterile bag, his brow furrowing. What was this? He knew every disease, every natural contaminant in the forest, and this wasn't one of them. His eyes scanned the immediate area, a professional habit. That's when he saw it, half buried in the churned earth near where Malawan had been trapped, a glint of brass, a bullet casing. He picked it up, his thumb running over the distinct markings. Not local, not one of the crude, readily available rounds used by the desperate, petty poachers he usually encountered. This was high caliber, precisely manufactured with an unusual primer strike. Its presence here, coupled with the metallic residue on Malawan, sent a cold spike of dread through him. This wasn't just an accident, or even simple poaching. This spoke of something far more organized, far more sinister. His scientific training, his entire career dedicated to detached observation and data, warred with a primal, gut-wrenching certainty. He should report this, follow protocol, hand it over to the authorities. But his experience, the years spent navigating the murky bureaucracy of wildlife conservation, told him that this too would likely be swallowed by the floodwaters of indifference. The memory of Sujinda's intelligent gaze, her desperate, trusting cooperation, burned in his mind. He had seen fear in Malawan's eyes, but also a fragile hope placed implicitly in him. How could he walk away? His moral conviction, a fierce, protective instinct, rose above the fear for his career. This discovery was a warning, a whisper of a deeper rot. He couldn't ignore it. The decision, agonizing in its weight, felt both reckless and utterly unavoidable. He had to know what this was, what dark force had touched Malawan, and by extension the force he had sworn to protect. He had to investigate. He knew with chilling clarity that this was a path from which there might be no return. The rhythmic chirping of crickets was the only sound breaking the stillness of the remote research station night. Inside the makeshift infirmary, Malawan slept, her small chest rising and falling with a fragile rhythm. Days had passed since the rescue, and the calf was slowly mending. But for Prajakh, the calm was deceptive. The bullet casing tucked away in a sterile pouch, and the memory of that shimmering metallic film on Malawan's skin gnawed at him. He couldn't shake the chilling implication. This wasn't natural. Under the faint glow of a desk lamp in his cramped, personal lab space, a converted storage closet, Prajakh meticulously prepared the residue sample. He worked in secret, the fluorescent hum of the microscope his only companion. His scientific training demanded an answer, even as his instincts screamed a warning. He ran preliminary tests, cross-referencing against known environmental contaminants and traditional poaching indicators. Nothing matched. The spectrograph slowly revealed its secrets. Traces of lead, yes, common in bullets, but also an unusual cocktail of rare earth elements in a polymer compound, sophisticated and synthetic. He frowned, pushing his glasses up his nose. This wasn't some backwoods poacher's ammunition, nor was it industrial runoff. This was engineered. The bullet casing, a 7.62 by 54R, was a military grade, not commonly found in civilian hands in this region, confirming his initial suspicion. The combination suggested a deliberate, targeted application, not an accident. The implications sent a cold shiver down his spine. Someone with significant resources and a clear motive was operating deep within the protected forest. While Prajakh wrestled with his unsettling discoveries, an entirely different, yet equally baffling phenomenon began to unfold outside. Sujinda and her family, usually elusive and wary of human contact, started appearing with unprecedented frequency around the research station's perimeter. Chai, the station's veteran tracker, was the first to notice the shift. "They're watching us, Prajakh," he'd said, his voice laced with an old-world reverence. "Not just passing through, they're observing." Nisa, the bright, methodical GIS specialist, began documenting their appearances. Her camera traps captured a distinct pattern. Sujinda would lead her family, often positioning herself in the open, her gaze fixed on the station, her ears subtly testing the air. Her calves, including Malawan, would mirror her actions, a clear, coordinated approach. They weren't aggressive, they were curious, almost expectant. "It's beyond anything I've seen," Nisa remarked, her fingers flying across her keyboard, analyzing the telemetry data. Their proximity, their behavior, it's like they're seeking contact, almost asking for something. Lin Wei, the stern, highly respected head of the research division, observed the unfolding situation with a cautious skepticism that bordered on professional detachment. "Fascinating, Nisa," she conceded, during one of their morning briefings, her gaze sweeping across the projection of elephant tracks just yards from the station fence. "But we must maintain scientific rigor. Correlation is not causation. We cannot anthropomorphize their behavior. It could be due to food availability, water access, or simply a shift in migratory patterns induced by the recent floods." Her words, though logical, felt dismissive to Prajakh, who felt the weight of Sujinda's intelligent gaze still imprinted on his memory. Prajakh tried to voice his growing unease, hinting at the anomalous residue in the bullet casing, but Dr. Lin Wei cut him off. "Prajakh, your emotional investment in Malawan is commendable, but we operate on data, not speculation. Until you have definitive proof of external human interference unrelated to known poaching activities, we adhere to established protocols." Her dismissal was polite but firm, effectively shutting down any immediate investigation into his findings. He understood her point of view. Extraordinary claims required extraordinary evidence. But as he watched Nisa's footage of Sujinda standing sentinel at dawn, a silent, majestic challenge to their scientific protocols, Prajakh felt a deepening conviction. The elephant's changed behavior, the unusual residue, the military-grade casing, they were all threads in a tapestry of a hidden threat, a human threat that Dr. Lin Wei, in her adherence to science, was failing to see. And Prajakh knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that this hidden threat was now watching them all. Almost a year had passed since the floodwaters receded in Malawan's impossible rescue. The strange bullet casing and metallic residue had become a persistent, nagging worry for Projok, a dark undercurrent to the station's daily rhythm. He'd continued his work, but his senses remained hyper-alert, searching for answers. He didn't have to search for long. The urgent, guttural trumpeting began just before dawn, ripping through the morning mist. It wasn't the usual social calls, it was a distress signal, primal and demanding. Projak, Nisa, and Chai were out of their bunks in seconds, converging at the perimeter fence. There, a sight that defied all understanding unfolded before them. Sujinda's family, a tight-knit unit, stood at the edge of the clearing, and at their center, moving with agonizing slowness, was Kaopad, the magnificent bull with one shorter tusk. He was favoring his left flank, his massive body listing, his eyes clouded with pain. The family was nudging him, guiding him, deliberately bringing him to them. Their calls were insistent, a clear, desperate plea for help. Somsak, the division's lead veterinarian, arrived moments later, his face grim. The team carefully sedated Kaopad, a delicate dance performed under the watchful, nervous eyes of his family, who kept a respectful but unwavering distance. As Dr. Somsak began his examination, Projak knelt beside the downed bull, a profound sense of horror twisting his gut. Kaopad's wound wasn't fresh, but it was horrifying. A deep, jagged entry point marred his flank, clearly a bullet wound. But it was the edges that defied belief. A peculiar, almost surgical cauterization, as if the searing heat of impact had sealed the flesh. Around the cauterized rim, small, iridescent shards gleamed within the torn muscle, not bone fragments, but something crystalline, synthetic. Somsak, his brow furrowed in concentration, probed the wound with a sterilized instrument. This is unlike anything I've ever seen, he murmured, his voice tight with professional shock. The tissue damage, the way it's cauterized, and these fragments. They're not natural. They're foreign, almost like microscopic shrapnel, but too uniform, too clean. He carefully extracted one of the tiny, almost transparent pieces, holding it up to the light. It glinted with an unnatural luminescence. This isn't standard ammunition, Projak. This is sophisticated, advanced. Projak's mind raced, connecting the dots. The residue on Malawan, the military-grade casing, and now this, a bullet wound with a self-cauterizing effect, embedding synthetic fragments. This wasn't the work of desperate local poachers seeking ivory or meat. This was precise, deliberate, and technologically advanced. This was targeted. Someone was using weapons designed not just to kill, but perhaps to track, to tag, or to disable with minimal trace. The implications were chilling. This wasn't random poaching. It was a systematic, calculated assault on the herd, hinting at an operation far more organized and sinister than he could have imagined. The familiar, agonizing conflict flared within him, fiercer than ever. His professional duty demanded he report this as poaching, as a bullet wound. But his moral compass, now deeply aligned with the silent plea of Sujinda and the palpable suffering of Kaopad, screamed for the truth. He looked at Dr. Somsak, at Nisa and Chai, their faces a mixture of concern and scientific curiosity, still seeing only a wounded animal and an unusual bullet. They didn't see the conspiracy, the advanced human danger he now suspected. To expose the truth would mean challenging official narratives, risking his career, perhaps even his life. He would be labeled a conspiracy theorist, dismissed as overly emotional. But to simply report poaching would be a betrayal of Kaopad, of Sujinda, of Maliwan, and of the fragile trust they had placed in him. It would be a betrayal of the forest itself, allowing a shadowy, technologically advanced enemy to operate unchecked. The weight of the decision pressed down on him, a crushing burden of ethical responsibility. He felt utterly alone, standing at a precipice, staring into an abyss of unseen enemies and unspoken truths. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that he couldn't back down. He had to expose this, no matter the cost. The smell of antiseptic still clung to Projak's clothes, a constant reminder of Kaopad's suffering. Dr. Sumsak had done what he could, but the bull's recovery would be long and arduous. Prajak, however, couldn't wait. Dr. Lin Wei had made it clear. The official report would document a poaching incident, an unusual bullet, nothing more. Her directives were always about maintaining stability, avoiding unnecessary controversy. But Prajak knew, deep in his gut, that this was far more than controversy. It was a cover-up in the making. Defying her explicit instructions, Prajak packaged the delicate bullet fragments, the unusual casing, and the metallic residue samples. He used his few trusted contacts, old university professors, and sympathetic lab technicians who valued truth over protocol, arranging for an off-the-books, expedited analysis. It was a risk, a blatant violation of his employment terms, but the images of Kyopad's wounded flank and Sujinda's pleading eyes solidified his resolve. Days later, a plain, unmarked envelope arrived. Prajak tore it open, his heart thudding against his ribs. The report was concise, clinical, and utterly devastating. The synthetic fragments extracted from Kyopad were not merely advanced. They were proprietary. The molecular structure, the unique polymer composite, the embedded rare earth markers, they all traced back to a single entity, Vanguard Biopharm Corp. Prajak stared at the name, a cold dread seeping into his bones. Vanguard, he knew them. A global behemoth, notorious for its aggressive, often environmentally devastating, resource extraction methods, particularly in undeveloped regions rich in biodiversity. Their operations were shrouded in secrecy, their legal teams legendary for silencing opposition. The report went further. The bullet casing's unusual primer strike and specific propellant residue were also linked to Vanguard's R&D division, a group rumored to be dabbling in advanced security solutions. Prajak reread the lines, his mind struggling to grasp the implications. This wasn't just about an elephant. It was about a powerful corporation, operating with impunity, likely testing some new territorial defense mechanism, or an extraction method so environmentally invasive that it required lethal deterrence. And the elephants were merely collateral damage, or perhaps even unwilling test subjects in their ruthless pursuit of profit. The revelation turned his fear into a cold, righteous anger. The metallic residue on Malawan, the military-grade casing, Kyopad's impossibly cauterized wound, it all painted a horrifying picture of a sophisticated, well-funded operation, systematically encroaching upon and harming the protected wildlife. Almost immediately, the pressure began. Subtle at first, an anonymous email vaguely threatening, hinting at unprofessional conduct and severe repercussions for deviating from established research parameters. Then, a visit from a representative of a vague environmental oversight committee, a well-dressed man who spoke in platitudes about compliance and resource allocation, his eyes cold and assessing. He casually mentioned funding cuts, the fragile political support for their station, and the importance of maintaining a good relationship with industry partners. Prajak knew he was being warned. Dr. Lin Wei, too, grew colder, more distant, her professional skepticism hardening into something akin to disapproval. He confided in Chai, showing him the report in the privacy of his small, cluttered office. Chai, his weathered face creased with concern, leaned against the closed door, his eyes scanning the corporate logos. Vanguard, he muttered, the name a curse. They're everywhere. Always hungry. Chai's presence, loyal and unwavering, was a small comfort in the suffocating paranoia. Prajak crumpled the anonymous note in his hand, his gaze fixed on the Vanguard logo on the report. He was outgunned, outmaneuvered, mishammered, his career hanging by a thread, but his moral conviction, forged in the floodwaters with Malawan and cemented by Kyopad's agony, solidified into unyielding resolve. This wasn't just an investigation anymore. It was a battle for the elephants, for the forest, for truth itself. He had stumbled upon something far larger and darker than he could have imagined, a shadow cast by corporate greed, and he knew with chilling certainty that he could not, would not abandon the fight. If you've been following Prajak's journey, you know the stakes are getting higher. But what he's about to uncover isn't just dangerous, it's a direct threat to everything he believes in, and his life is now on the line. Make sure you hit that like button, share this story, and subscribe to stay tuned for the explosive finale. This isn't just wildlife conservation anymore. It's a full-blown conspiracy, and the next steps could determine the fate of these magnificent creatures. The anonymous threats escalated, not just to Prajak's, but subtle whispers reaching Nisa and Chai, hinting at job losses and funding cuts for the entire station. Dr. Lin Wei's skepticism had curdled into outright hostility, her silence a heavy cloak. Prajak was an outcast, an anomaly in his own world. But the growing pile of evidence, the Vanguard report, the casing, the residue, Cowpad's agonizing wound, screamed louder than any warning. The time for protocol was over. One sleepless night, hunched over his flickering laptop, Prajak made the agonizing decision. He reached out to Maya Sharma, an investigative journalist he'd followed for years, known for her fearless exposes on corporate malfeasance. He compiled everything, the scientific analyses, his detailed observations of the elephant's behavior, the anonymous threats. He encrypted it all, attaching a desperate, heartfelt plea for help, explaining the unthinkable alliance he'd formed with the elephants. He sent it, a single click that shattered his career but ignited a desperate hope. Then, the truly extraordinary began. The elephants, Sujinda's family, now exhibited a bond with Prajak that transcended anything recorded in scientific literature. It started subtly. While tracking them one morning, Sujinda paused, turning her massive head, her eyes fixed on his. She let out a low rumble, then shifted, deliberately veering off their usual migratory path. Prajak, armed with his covert camera and a growing sense of awe, followed. She led him to a clearing, a place of unsettling silence. There, partially hidden beneath thick foliage, was a sleek, metallic pillar, almost invisible against the jungle. As Prajak approached, he felt a strange, almost imperceptible vibration in the air. A sonic fence, designed to deter, to disorient, to drive animals away from a designated zone without physical barriers. Further on, guided by Cowpad's careful steps, Prajak discovered a series of specialized traps. Not snares or pits, but highly sophisticated, almost camouflage devices designed to capture or immobilize without killing, likely for tagging or resource management. The fragments in Cowpad's wound clicked into place. These were Vanguard's territorial defense mechanisms. The elephants were acting as his silent, intelligent guardians, leading him directly to the invisible scars on their land. Malawan, now strong and curious, would sometimes brush against his leg, a gentle nudge of encouragement. Sujinda's knowing gaze was a constant reassurance, a shared understanding that deepened with each discovery. They trusted him, relied on him. This unprecedented alliance became his sole compass, his only shield. His official world, however, crumbled. Lin Wei openly questioned his mental state, implying he was projecting onto the animals. His access to official resources dwindled. He became a ghost, operating in the shadows of the station he once called home, relying solely on Chai's quiet loyalty and Nisa's increasingly uneasy but still supportive data collection. Every step he took felt like walking on a razor's edge. He knew Vanguard had eyes and ears everywhere. The journalist Maya was his only hope for exposing them. This mutual trust, this desperate, reckless alliance with the elephants, forged in the crucible of corporate greed, strengthened Prajak's resolve. He was no longer just a medic. He was a warrior, guided by the wisdom of the forest. He knew what he had to do. He had to gather undeniable proof, enough to shatter Vanguard's shield of secrecy. He had to provoke a final, desperate confrontation with the hidden human forces controlling these illegal operations, knowing full well that this fight could cost him everything, even his life. But for Sujinda, for Maliwan, for Cowpad, and for the soul of the forest, it was a price he was willing to pay. The jungle felt alive. Every leaf, every rustle, a whisper of impending confrontation. Prajak moved with a primal caution, his covert camera clutched tight, the data drive secured deep in his tactical vest. Behind him, Maya Sharma, the investigative journalist, filmed everything, her face a mask of determined urgency. But their true guides were ahead. Sujinda, her massive form parting the dense foliage with practiced ease, Maliwan, a steadfast shadow at her side, and Kyopad, recovered but still bearing the scar, moving with silent power. They were an unlikely vanguard, leading Projak and Maya deeper into the forbidden heart of the protected territory, towards Vanguard's hidden facility. The elephant's senses were their map. They navigated winding paths, avoided tripwires Projak couldn't see, and signaled unseen patrols with subtle shifts in their gait or a low, resonant rumble. Sujinda paused, her trunk testing the air, then subtly angled left, circumventing a series of camouflage sonic emitters Projak only just detected. The facility emerged from the thick canopy like a cancerous growth. Modular structures, generators humming softly, and heavily armed men patrolling a makeshift perimeter. Projak and Maya moved in, shielded by the jungle and the elephant's watchful presence. They spotted the sophisticated traps, the drone launch pads, and the advanced sensor arrays Projak had suspected. Maya's camera never stopped rolling. Projak identified the central hub, a mobile command unit. He needed direct access, incontrovertible proof. As he tried to bypass a perimeter sensor, a metallic clang echoed through the trees. A guard, alerted, spun around, weapon raised. "Freeze!" The shout ripped through the fragile calm. Corporate security forces, armed with military precision, swarmed from the facility. Projak shoved Maya behind a thick-trunked tree. This was it. They were exposed. Then, Sujinda trumpeted. It wasn't a panicked cry, but a resounding, almost strategic command that vibrated through the earth. The entire herd, 30 strong, moved. Not a wild, chaotic stampede, but a coordinated, intelligent advance. Kyopad charged a section of the perimeter, not to break it, but to collapse a camouflage structure, revealing a series of large, cylindrical containers. Illegal resource drilling equipment. Other elephants focused on drawing the guards' attention, fanning out, kicking up enormous clouds of dust, blocking sight lines, creating a deafening symphony of roars and thundering footsteps. They weren't attacking to kill. They were creating a diversion, precisely designed to sow chaos and expose the very infrastructure Vanguard sought to hide. Amidst the pandemonium, Projak saw his chance. He sprinted towards the exposed command unit, Maya close behind, her camera capturing the bewildering spectacle of the elephant's calculated assault. He bypassed the console, quickly downloading critical data onto his drive. Drilling schedules, resource projections, communication logs, and encrypted directives detailing payoffs to corrupt local officials. Just as he secured the drive, a guard leveled his weapon. But before he could fire, Maliwan, now almost fully grown, let out a piercing squeal, darting between Projak and the guard. It wasn't an attack, but a desperate protective maneuver. The guard hesitated, disoriented by the sheer force of the elephant's presence, allowing Projak a split second to disable him. The chaos culminated in an undeniable victory. The elephant's strategic intervention not only protected Projak and Maya, but laid bare Vanguard's illegal operation for all to see. The data drive, combined with Maya's footage of the coordinated elephant action and the revealed machinery, was undeniable proof. As the first distant wail of official sirens reached them, likely local authorities, but hopefully now forced to act, Projak looked at Sujinda. Her trunk was raised in a triumphant trumpet, her eyes burning with an ancient wisdom and a fierce loyalty that brought tears to his eyes. This wasn't just a win, it was a revolution. The elephants hadn't just saved his life, they had proven their sentience, their strategic intelligence, and their profound interconnected loyalty. The conspiracy went deeper than just Vanguard. It exposed a rotten core of corrupt officials willing to sell their heritage for profit. But in the face of such betrayal, nature itself had risen. Projak knew the battle wasn't over, but the world would now see elephants not just as endangered species, but as intelligent beings, capable of strategic alliances, silent guardians demanding respect and protection. Their actions would forever change human-wildlife relations and lay the groundwork for new, more profound conservation laws, echoing a truth that the jungle had long held sacred. Humanity was not alone, and it was time to listen to the wisdom of the wild. Projak stood amidst the dismantling facility, the fading roar of the elephants replaced by the shouts of security and the distant wail of sirens. The data drive, hot in his hand, was proof. Proof of Vanguard's heinous acts, of the corrupt officials they'd bribed, and most profoundly, proof of the elephant's unparalleled intelligence and loyalty. He was a medic, sworn to save, not to become an accidental detective exposing a global conspiracy. Yet, like the acrid smell of death that might cling to a field medic's nostrils, the metallic tang on Malawan's skin, the cauterized wound on Kaopad, had pulled him into a world far darker than simple poaching. His journey, initially an impossible rescue, transformed into a desperate fight against unseen forces. The suspicious activity he'd felt, the deliberately placed anomalies, led him to a truth that would change everything. The world had just witnessed an undeniable alliance, an unbreakable bond between man and beast. Projak had found his dead lion in a barrel, not a literal one, but the metaphorical death of innocence, revealing nature's unseen guardians. This brutal chapter, exposed by desperation and a profound alliance, would not be discarded. The fight was far from over, but a new era of understanding had begun. End words. 2-2.